right. All right. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get started this morning. I know we are still missing one of our speakers, but hopefully he will hop on by the time I'm done with my little intro. So my name, for anybody that's not familiar with Tech Hub, I'm the CEO of South Florida Tech Hub. My name is Nikki Caboose. And this morning we have a really interesting topic on ChatGPT and generative AI, which I know we ended up doing this. For anybody that's not familiar, we started community coffees, these virtual panel discussions at the very beginning of COVID. So we've been doing them for quite a while now. And then we stopped over the last probably 6 to 8 months. And so this is actually the first one that we've done in quite a bit. So I guess welcome and thank you for everybody that is joining us this morning, because you guys are the first one of not only 2023, but the first one we've done in quite a while. Apologize if I seem a little, there we go, because I'm letting people in the waiting room as I'm talking as well. So this morning, I just want to, for anybody that's brand new to South Florida Tech Hub, give a really brief overview of who we are and what we do, and then we'll get started on our conversation and the real reason you guys are all here. So South Florida Tech Hub, we are a technology nonprofit. We are based in South Florida, covering Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, and we actually just decided to vote as a board, and we added some of the Treasure Coast area as well. So we have, which will soon be coming out, is some announcements about some new companies that just joined in the Treasure Coast in Indian River State College that we're now working with as well. So if anybody is listening from that area or has connections to that area, please let me know, because I'm trying to get more connected in the Treasure Coast. And as an organization, so a little bit about what we do is basically we are trying to bring the entire South Florida Tech Hub and now Treasure Coast together as one, so that we are bringing together our small businesses, our startups, higher education institutions, any of our larger enterprises or business partners, and bringing everybody together so that they know where all of their resources are, that we get the community better connected, and making sure that people that are new to the area as well, because as you guys know, we've got a lot of people from New York and California and influx from other areas across the country and even the world coming into South Florida, that they've got a central hub or a central area and say, hey, I don't know where to go to for these resources. Who can I connect with about this? So even though it may be something that South Florida Tech Hub doesn't do ourselves or may not directly offer, we've been trying to make some really great connections with other nonprofits, other organizations, chambers, even event organizers in the area to make sure that we're connected and can keep you guys all connected. Some of the things that we do offer directly is a lot of networking events, educational content such as this. We do community coffees, workshops on Fridays, typically from noon to 1 on any specific topic with a single instructor. We also are doing a lot of our own signature annual events, such as golf events, award shows. We have a lot of like fundraising activities and things that we're doing on the talent side with higher education and even K through 12. So if anybody is listening, I know some of you that I've already seen this morning are involved in this with us, but we do a lot of K through 12 efforts to introduce kids to STEM careers and also coding as young as age 5. So I kind of always mention this, but one of our last coding classes, we had a kid that was actually 4 that came in and didn't even know what a space bar was. And so that's kind of what we're looking for, is we get average ages of maybe 7 or 8 all the way up to about 14. And of course, we work with high school, college, and into career as well. Last but not least, is something we also do is supporting our, like I was saying, industry partners, whether they're startup or larger enterprise. So a lot of our members, because we are a membership-driven organization, can be a single founder startup that maybe nobody would recognize the name, all the way up to the Office Depots, FPLs, City Furnitures of the world that I'm sure you guys recognize those names. Those are also our members. So we are small business all the way through larger enterprise. We're also industry subsector agnostic, meaning that whether they are manufacturing, fintech, health tech, it doesn't matter to us as long as they are in the tech space within the region. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers and have each of you just one by one go ahead and introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about you, just a snippet right before we get into the Q&A. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get to that. I am going to go ahead and spotlight all of our speakers and ASL interpreters as well. Beth, thank you for being our ASL interpreter this morning. And let's see. I'm going to find each one of our speakers. Got Chris here. Walter. Oh, Robbie, we're on my screen, and now where'd you go? There we go. Add spotlight. And do I have Nick on yet? No. Okay. All right. So if anybody, hopefully by now, through the pandemic, everybody's used to Zoom, but if you're not, just in case, at the very top right of your screen, there should be a little button that says View. There's either Speaker View or Gallery View. If you click on Speaker View, you should be able to see myself, the three panelists, and then our ASL interpreter, Beth. It should be the only one on the screens. Or you can go to Gallery View and you will see everybody that has their cameras on. All right, so to get right to it, I'm just going to pick on you first, Chris, because you are first on my screen. So if you want to give us your intro.
Yeah, what's happening, everyone? I am Chris Johnson, Director of Product at Silver Logic. We build a lot of business automation, a lot of Web 2 tools, anything with like React front ends, Python back ends, or kind of a little bit of everything. I started following GPT a little bit last year. Jasper was kind of something that caught my ear. And then right around when the image models started coming out, I dove. Once I figured out Stable Diffusion was open source and this little package you could download since about Q4 of last year, I've just been obsessed with it, diving in and figuring out all the ways we can kind of stitch these technologies together and deliver some cool experiences.
Cool. Thank you so much, Chris. Up next, I've got you, Walter.
Okay, so my name is Walter Shields. I am the founder of Walter Shields Data Academy, which is an educational platform that specifically focuses on training people to be competent in data analytics and data science. So that being said, I have done a number of different educational materials in this subject area, starting, I guess, with I have a best-selling book that's out there. I work with LinkedIn Learning, producing courses and course material on the subject area. And that being said, I'm also a student of this as well. So, I don't think I could be an effective teacher without being a student. So I'm always learning. That's what has my interest in things like ChatGPT. I think it's just really amazing, but understanding it and helping others to understand it is a focus of mine as well. So that's me in a nutshell.
Perfect. Thank you, Walter. And I think with tech, we all feel like students. At least I know I do. And you guys know I'm super non-technical, but I feel like even with all the tech people, everybody's continuously being students. Last but not least, I feel like our serial community coffee panelist, Rob.
Hey everyone, thank you, Nikki. So Rob Petrosino, I'm the head of emerging tech and innovation at a company called Peak Activity, which is a Boynton Beach company. Been around for a little bit over 7 years. I've been with them for a little bit over 5 years, and I lead all of our augmented reality, spatial computing, artificial intelligence, machine learning, now generative AI and blockchain projects. So as I like to say, I'm a master of all or none, just depends on what day you catch me on. So I'm very excited to chat with everyone, and I look forward to the conversation and just educating everyone a little bit on how it's being used right now and what type of projects are coming out.
Thank you, Rob. And we're getting some comments in chat, Rob, that people can hear you, but your audio is really soft.
All right, how about now? Much better?
That sounds better on my end.
All right,
Does that sound better on everybody else's end? If anybody could, there you go. I just got it perfect in chat. Thank you. All right, so how we're going to do this is I am going to ask the general questions, and this can be for any of the panelists, so feel free to take it away. The better the conversation is when you guys almost forget I'm here, so feel free to just have a free conversation. I will interrupt you if I need to. And our first question, just to get started, whoever would like to take this first, is in non-technical terms, for anybody that's not a techie on here listening this morning, is what the heck is ChatGPT?
Okay, I'll go.
Okay.
I guess in plain and simple language, which is the language I like to teach in, is really it's just a type of technology, artificial intelligence specifically, that can have a conversation with you. So it has utilizes something called natural language processing. And what that does is fancy way of just saying, hey, you can actually have a chat with it as though it was a human being. And I think that's probably the most prominent aspect and more, I guess, down to earth way I could explain what it is.
Yeah, I refer to it to some of my in-laws and executives as Siri on steroids, right? It's a very, very powerful alternative to Siri on iOS devices that's much smarter and can generate content a lot faster and more intuitively.
So I'll break it down to like kind of the first experiment. Really, when OpenAI like launched this idea, their idea was like, can we just guess the next word in the sentence? And really all the things that it can do about speaking English and carrying a conversation is really just a a mathematical, like statistical analysis of what the next word is, and that's why you get a lot of confabulation too, because it does a pretty good job of getting stuff right, but it also does a good job of doing things that sound right but are absolutely wrong. And again, that's kind of a result of all it's really doing is just guessing the next word based on all it's seen on the internet.
Those are wonderful descriptions. Thank you guys so much. Hopefully that helps anybody that's listening to this that's non-technical understand a little bit better. So one question we have here also is, and this may be for more of the technical folks, is can you talk a little bit about the language or technology that ChatGPT is based on?
Yeah, I'm happy to at least start. So Walter mentioned natural language processing, so I'll pick up that one. That's the ability for a machine learning or AI system to understand written or spoken word, right? So that is quite literally a contextual engine to understand what is being put into it, right? So that's the first component of this. The second and third component are a little bit more complex, but deep learning is the second component. Deep learning is the ability to take what is contextually being put into this and then compare it to other reference data points. In this sense, it's a lot, right? Trillions of data points, and the ChatGPT 4 will have 10x or 100x the amount of data points, and then it's going to go through the generative process to export and answer. So there's a lot of different layers in there. Walter, maybe Chris can go into it a little bit deeper, but NLP is that first layer of just contextually grabbing what you're saying or what you're writing into the system.
Yeah, I think that's really a really accurate way of describing it. How I try to kind of break it down is in terms of like inputs, outputs, and what creates that output. So the T part of GPT is a transformer. So that's where it basically helps the model process sequential data, which is exactly what we were saying about guessing the next word. So that's the input part. So that's what's coming in. The output part is the generative part, which is G. What's the G stands for in ChatGPT? So that's basically to generate text in response to that input. And what text it generates is the I guess the key part, which is the pre-training. So that's where it's trained on massive amounts of data, which is basically OpenAI has gathered this from many different sources, mainly I believe the internet. And that massive amount of data is just more technically called a corpus. And that's sort of it in a nutshell. So input, outputs, and how it gets that output is through this massive pre-trained amount of data.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much a black box of how it works. Even the experts don't really know what's going on. They just know that it does work. But essentially, it turns It breaks up the words into tokens and basically just turns it into math. And it's essentially just the most amazing math equation you've ever seen to be able to talk. Like, it has no concept of a lot of this stuff. It's just doing the math of statistical probabilities.
Thank you. Thank you. So one question I did want to ask is, so obviously with the hype of ChatGPT, we're hearing more and more now about AI, and everybody's talking about, you know, the AI boom, and like Miami Tech is all going AI now. Like, so, but one thing, and I was actually just talking to Pete about this last week, is that AI is in fact actually not new at all. Artificial intelligence, you know, first came around in, like, I think it was the mid 50s. I was looking up this week. And companies like IBM have been working on IBM since then. So can you give us some examples of, like, for comparison, what's the difference between analytical AI and now this generative AI that's used with ChatGPT?
I love this question. I will take a first swag at it. So analytical AI and generative AI are two fantastic categories. There's thousands of other categories. All right. But we'll focus on these two. The best contextual example that I'll give you for analytical AI is if you've ever driven in a Tesla. Okay. When you drive on your dashboard, there's little car icons that pop up. There's little cone icons pop up, right? What it's doing in analytical AI is referencing what it thinks a cone looks like, and it's going to show you on screen. So it's making a guesstimation or a calculation, a probability that this is a cone. Okay, so that's very analytical AI. Generative AI is like Siri, like Clippy from Word way back when, right? To a degree, that's giving you information that is based on the same type of codex, right? Or data. And it's referencing that codex and then generating something that is prescriptive. So the big difference between the two is, you know, for analytical AI is the categorization of items to a degree. And the generative AI side is actually creating something. So that's how we classify it. I've worked on projects that do both. So from just this straightforward, here's a photo, tell me the number of people that are in that photo on the analytical side, to generative, you know, chat bots that are based on a specific set of information or set of context so that it can reference that material to give you the appropriate response.
Yeah, I think that was a great breakdown by Rob. You know, I like Nikki mentioned it. This is sort of old news as far as AI. It's been around a long time, and why has it been around? I think the basis of everything is on statistics, which has been around, and probability, right? It's been around a very long time, and this is just sort of the evolution of it. So I would say, I guess my layman's way of breaking down the difference, like analytical AI, that sort of deals with I guess predefined criteria. So it's making decisions based on criteria that's predefined. So like facial recognition or fraud detection. These are things that it's, oh, is that a face, or is this action considered fraud? So that's analytical AI. As far as generative AI, that's where you're now having the same, a different model produce something that is, I would say, is like original content, right? So it can, so that's why you could put in to Chat GPT, say, hey, create a creative story for me, and it will create an original creative story, not a predefined target that it's going after. So I think that's probably, at least my way of describing, the biggest difference between analytical versus generative. One is sort of like a predefined target. The other is actually creating original content.
Yeah, I think all those are great answers. Just one thing I'll touch on is that essentially generative AI is just reverse engineered analytical AI. Like, the reason we have models that can generate images is because they had categorization models that could identify stuff, and they're like, hey, what if we turned it around? And a couple years ago, they've got, like, they could get little tiny pictures to be reverse engineered, and that's how we get it. So really, to me, it's just analytical engine, and analytical is just kind of turned on its head to start generating stuff. And but I think it's pretty similar technology.
Perfect. Thank you all for your answers. Nick, thanks for hopping on. I'm going to give you a second, Nick, if you want to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you. For anybody that is listening, Nick was one of our panelists. He's just a little bit late, so we want to give him the opportunity just to give a little bit of background on himself before we get to the next question.
Hi, everyone. I'm over at a coffee shop, so if you hear background noise and dogs, I'm in West Palm Beach, downtown. My name's Nick Manaki. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Bundle IQ. And we basically built an AI-powered knowledge base. So it's kind of like a playground for the mind, to help people understand information more quickly. So think like the 3,000-page climate reports that you probably will never read. How do you easily extract insights from that data, and make connections that maybe aren't obvious as it relates to whatever you are trying to understand about climate change? So that's a little bit about me. I'm going to go back on mute for a second while it's truck passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. All right, so we went through the easier stuff of what is ChatGPT and how the heck are we getting all of this great data. But now I want to talk a little bit about some of the capabilities. So what are some of the things that actually ChatGPT can do for us, or even not ChatGPT, but just generative AI in general? What are some of its capabilities? Which I'm seeing by Rob's face, I think are endless.
Yeah, I'll let I feel like I keep answering first. I want Walter, Chris, or Nick to go first this time. I'll close out.
I was liking the little order we got. I felt like we were right down the way.
Yeah, you're setting the tone. So go for it. Go for it.
All right. So I think Chris, you mentioned DALL-E. That generative art AI model that came out, that is as generative as ChatGPT is, just specifically for visual images and styling of images, just like ChatGPT and OpenAI's models for text. So with those two components, anytime that there is something portrayed on screen visually or something written in text, you can basically ask a computer to do it. And it is quite literally everything underneath the sun. There is a fantastic website. It's called There's an AI for That. Okay, so there's 50,000 submissions to that website, and it's all AI SaaS companies that are creating a very specific instance of generative AI for a text-based model or an art-based visual model to solve some type of issue. Right. So that could be everything from, hey, can you use this generative AI text-based model to lower my Comcast bill, which technically is against the terms of service, and they can cancel your bill. Just put that on the side. I'm also not a lawyer. And then on the other side is these generative AIs for visuals. So quite literally, you can take a photo of any product, take this coffee mug, and it'll transcribe that coffee mug into a forest, into a marble countertop, into a coffee shop, into any situation. So now you can quite literally ask a computer to do anything in this visual field or text field. Is it the best thing you've ever seen underneath the sun? Absolutely not. But it's one step closer, and it's aggregating a data model on either side to be more fine-tuned and closer to the expectations that we have as individuals. So that's where I'll leave it at, like a super macro level. There's very, very specific examples that you can get into, and I hope the other panelists dive into those a little bit, from writing legalese on a contract through AI, all the way to creating video generative AI that'll allow you to change how your face is speaking when you're either speaking in Spanish, English, Cantonese, Chinese, whatever it may be. It'll actually change the formation and how your lips speak without the actor ever having to do that. So there's a lot of different different types, but those are the big categories that I throw them into when they say, well, what can it do? It can do quite literally anything in these two categories at this point.
Yeah, I think sky is the limit, right? I think instead of, so I try to even remind myself, like, instead of really trying to dive into the what's under the hood, so to speak, and literally I try to use that analogy, like, once something has been created, do you really want to figure out how it works, or do you really want to know how to apply it? And I kind of hang around in the how to apply it world. Rob touched on something there. So for instance, ChatGPT has been trained, as we said, on massive amounts of data called corpuses. And part of that massive amount of data is different languages, right? So there's, English, of course, then there's Chinese and French, and just a ton of different languages. So just in that space alone, in terms, when you think about the use cases, it can be used as to translate obviously into different types of languages, but you as doing business, just understanding cultures and having your marketing plan or whatever your business objective is in terms of doing business in other countries. Now, sky's the limit again in terms of, well, how can I just do business as opposed to translate and figure out how another country speaks, or what other language goes on in another country. To me, it's just more of using the technology so that you can take everyday things that you're doing now and have it be much more enhanced by this particular technology. So things like creative writing, or there's things that people are toying with, which is like in the mental health world, which I think is a little dangerous, but again, I think it's worthwhile to think, well, where can this be applied? And just understanding the base technology is really the catalyst to doing that. So rambled a bit, but that's my take on it.
Well, Walter, I love what you said about how it works as opposed to the application, because that's something I was kind of toying with, because I'm not AI guy at all. I'm like Web 2 UX designer. And I even tried, there was a paper that kind of started all this. The paper was called Attention's All You Need. Essentially, the paper said that you don't need massive corpuses of data to learn on, which is kind of what we thought. You really only need to focus on the right stuff. And I tried to read this paper, and by like the first couple like pages, I was out. I was like, okay, like this is way beyond me. But it's a cool time to jump in, right? Because you don't need to know how it works. All you need to know that there's this little genie in a bottle that does things. And the things that excites me the most about what these little genies in the bottle do is that you can just chain them together and you can create more things. Like, I'll put a link in the chat. There's this website called Mixo, and it turns one sentence into like a starter website for a new business you want to start, with a little email collection thing. And to me, that's really interesting, because to me, the first thing they did is they take your sentence and then ask it a series of questions on top of that. So it's like, okay, we want to do a business like this. What are some of the services that they would provide? And then they took the list of those services and then asked, okay, explain a little more about those services. And then it asked me, okay, give a quote about someone using those services. So like with one input, you're just generated all this stuff, and it's like picking you images that are right there. So and again, I see a lot of applications, and especially with plugging in your own data. And I'm gonna let Nick talk a little bit about. Oh, it looks like he's talking to someone. But I think the coolest thing is that when you're chaining these things together, that you can, like, ChatGPT was only trained up until June 2021. So anything that happened after that, or anything that was specifically to you, it doesn't know. But it's very, very possible to plug in your own data and then get one of these based on based on the things you know. And again, that's something Nick was ahead of all of us with Bundle IQ. So I'll let him talk about how to plug in ChatGPT and utilize your own data.
Thanks, Chris. I had an interesting conversation with a buddy of mine who's a videographer. He does a lot of work with the Palm Beach County Historic Society. And as you can imagine, you know, going back to the Gilded Age when this county or this area was kind of founded, there's a lot of stories that could be told. And so he started this series called Behind the Palms, and it's on YouTube. And they, you know, one thing that he said he was really excited about to use our software with was to help create to create storylines based on the context of history. And so you think, like, you know, imagine scanning like, you know, thousands and thousands of PDFs from all these different newspapers and like all these articles and things that have been written about Henry Flagler and like all the people, Meisner, et cetera. And then being able to say something to the effect of like, tell me a time when Henry Flagler really struggled with work. And then it literally like can go into that like treasure trove of data and then actually come up and bring you like a narrative that would probably be pretty difficult to connect the dots on. And that's something that Bundle IQ and our AI Alani can do. And I've already tested it, so it's pretty amazing to kind of see what the results are. But that's really the magic now, is like, okay, how do you leverage these models to create things based on the data that you care about? Because obviously, you know, ChatGPT and a lot of these other large language models, and I think, you know, even JP Morgan yesterday said that no longer, you know, they can't, they're banning it from the corporate institutes, and governments are banning it, et cetera, because, you know, it can kind of bring you down a path that maybe isn't accurate. And you make decisions based on information that just, you know, isn't relevant, contextually relevant. So, you know, what excites me the most is like, how do you essentially bundle up like your knowledge or the things that you care about and make better decisions as a result? You know, I'm working with the World Bank right now, and they have thousands and thousands and thousands of reports. And like, who's reading these reports? And the reality is not that many people are, but there's so much incredible information in these reports that can be extracted in the context of work that's being done in the field and on the ground. So, you know, helping inform those strategies is really sort of our domain expertise, and something that we get really excited about, if you can't tell. but they're, you know, the final layer is kind of built on these large language models. I'm going to stop now. I actually have to jump here in about 5 minutes. So happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you, Nick, for your added thoughts there. And I see, Rob, you had your hand up. Did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I wanted to bring in a really good point that everyone just rotated around, is functionality and usability, and ultimately the content that is trained on, that you're training on. Okay, so everyone floated around this idea of, if you have good content, or you have good information, or you have good data that you can train on top of, then you can have a very specific task that can be solved by machine learning, generative, visual, text, right? Analytical. The hard part is, if you don't have good data, then you don't have a good machine learning model, and you don't have good outputs, right? Every output from the machine learning model is a percentage correct, right? Self-prescribed percentage that this is the right answer. So as the phrase goes, garbage in, garbage out. If you have bad data on the front end, you'll have bad data on the back end. So, right, making sure that you're working with organizations that understand that and have the right context, right, and making sure that you're training for a very specific thing versus a massive solution is important. Something to just keep in mind. I saw someone say, like, well, how do I start? You can definitely start, but understand that you're fine tuning, and you want to start with a very specific model versus something that is like general intelligence, right? Or, you know, iRobot style conversational AI is probably not the place to start, right? Be very, very focused.
Perfect. Thank you. And I actually wanted to slightly change the direction of the conversation. It was actually perfect with Nick's comments in his last, or his statement, his last comments was, so we talked a lot about the capabilities, and he alluded to some of the limitations I so I wrote a little bit here just so I would get the data correct, but so ChatGPT specifically and generative AI in general is designed to emulate human thinking, right? Which is what we've been talking about. So one of those traits it emulates is inference or conclusions that are reached based on evidence or reasoning. So again, what we've been talking about is a lot of that is going to depend on accuracy of those inferences. So so far, what I found, the preliminary research is showing that a lot of generative models are truthful only about 25%. And again, I think it goes back to, you know, the finding of the good data to start with. But even on ChatGPT, as their opening page of the website, they've got a quote there that says limited knowledge of world events after 2021, meaning anything that is, you know, historical data or older, they're not going to have access to. And it also says in a recent blog, there's a specific quote here that I made sure to get was ChatGPT sometimes writes plausible sounding but incorrect or nonsensical answers. Fixing this issue is challenging as during real life training, there's currently no source of truth. And this was an open AI blog that they had written. So my question for you all is, when using text producing AI, what are your thoughts on disclosing authorship of the text and fact checking the text that's being produced?
Yeah, I love this one. And it's a great question. Well, like, is it really accurate? Sometimes. The number one way that I would be looking at using ChatGPT or any generative model as a jumping off point for my team to go from idea to copy editing and validation check. Okay. It is not the end all publisher. It is not also the copy editor. It is also not the fact checker. The best instance that I've had seen is within Microsoft Bing search. They're using ChatGPT to scrape context and then provide an answer with annotations. So you're getting the annotation of the article where this came from. Now it's your job as an individual to go fact check those annotations and make sure that they're correct. This is a tool, not a AI that understands the world and where you live in and how things are communicated, right? So you have to use it as a tool. Fact checking is 100% important. Understanding tonality, if you're using it for a brand or marketing or anything along those lines, is greatly important as well. So making sure that you can communicate and provide a prompt to the AI that's going to give you the generation of content that you want, but it is solely responsible of you to make sure that that is important to the people that are going to be reading it, and real and contextually the right one. So that's where I'll say you have to at least start.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I mean, a lot of great stuff circled around. I think Rob mentioned something that's super important in terms of like it's ChatGPT is only as unbiased as the data that it's been trained on, right? And where did it get trained? How did it get trained? It's based on data that has been floating around from us, right? Us human beings. And we're not the most unbiased living organisms, right? So it's so that's something that is super important, right? I think part of the coolness, but the danger of it is because it's so human-like in terms of like you could kind of forget that you need to exactly what was just mentioned, fact check. You have to fact check. You cannot take it as a truth, and it has sort of this lure of dependence, right? So if you start depending on it without applying critical thinking and just allowing it to make decisions, then you're getting into very dangerous territory because there is misinformation in the data, there is bias in the data. So, and I think that percentage that Nikki threw out there is very accurate. It's not far from 100% correct, right? So I think those are some of the things that as we get excited and as we start to think again of the use cases, that we must bear in mind that is a big red flag that you must walk with caution once you step into this sort of space.
Yeah, you had mentioned that, do I need to share that this was generated by AI? And I'm pushing back that I don't think you need to do that. I mean, I think if you just gave it some like willy-nilly prompt and post it, I think you're gonna write it on your forehead that you'd used AI. And really, it's a tool. It's a tool to use. It's like spell check. Like if you're gonna post it, you're putting your name on it. So whether you didn't fact check it or not is kind of up to you. So yeah, it's there's tons of people out there that just let it like, because again, it doesn't really know what it's talking about. It's just predicting the next word, and that's how we get these. Confabulation is what it's called. It just hallucinates some of these answers, and sometimes it'll just get little things wrong. Like I was asking it to tell me about Sam Bankman-Fried, and it said he was a British entrepreneur. It nailed everything else, but it called him British, and I was like, where did it get that? I have no idea, but that shouldn't matter. So yeah, it's definitely on us to double check these things. But again, if you plug it in with something like with Bundle IQ, or you plug it into some of these vector databases, essentially what you're doing is doing a semantic search of all your data, and then you're kind of loading up your prompt with the correct data, and then asking it the question against this data. So that's a pretty good way. If you're building an app with it, you can kind of put some pitfalls in there to say, again, if like you can just, again, just with prompts with no like settings or anything, you just tell it, if you don't know, say you don't know, or if the data is not compelling, tell it you don't know. So just to give you like, I know a misconception I had is that you had to train a model to do what you want, to train it on your data, but that was kind of less true. Training a model helps you get a, like, it's like if you want to train, like do a fine tuning of ChatGPT, it helps the output, and it helps, like if you want to format a tweet, you can help it format into a tweet. But if you actually wanted to know more stuff, that you use that with a vector database, and that's just what gets really, really, really powerful.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one quick thing. As it stands right now, you talked about authoring. AI generated content is not copyrightable, right? So per the US government copywriting organization, right, standards, they put forward an AI generated comic book, and it was shot down for copyright. So that's the other end of things. Chris, I don't know, you go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that. I mean, I think that was kind of a rash reaction. Usually the government kind of waits and looks a little slowly. I mean, honestly, because a lot of that was the images created too. And honestly, I think that's absolutely ridiculous that they do that. Again, like, if they should definitely deter people from writing like a little prompt and then turning that in as your paper. But using GPT to, like, there, it's a, like, I can show you some of my artistic processes that I do. It's not just enter prompt and then out comes an image I like. It takes a long time of like editing the prompts and then getting something new and using this as a new jumping off point. And so the same thing with, like, to say that it's like banning Photoshop when it comes to these guys that the USPTO denied the copyright on that graphic novel. I think it's going to come back to bite them. I think the Supreme Court is gonna overturn it, because again, it's just a small. If you hired a writing assistant, you would be allowed to make a copyright for it. And that's what I would kind of consider this more, is that it's an amazing writing assistant. It's an amazing way to digest copy. You can feed it copy. Like, I was reading over a contract the other day, and I would just put in section by section if I didn't really understand. I'd be like, can you summarize this for me? And it would kind of give me that. So again, like, I understand deterring students from using it, because they'll just not even think and not use their brain. But for me, I was learning how to code Python the other day with it, and it was the best tutor I could ever have, because not only was it giving me the code that I wanted, it was prefacing it, and then whatever the after preface is, and it would summarize like what it was about to do, give me the code, and then explain all the things it did. It was amazing. So yeah, I think that particularly what you said about the non-copyrightable, that might be true for right now, but I don't think that's good. I don't think that has legs.
Yeah, I mean, on the other end of it, right, you have to have a data source that these things are trained off of. So there's a class action lawsuit now against Dolly, right? And that's from the
Mhm.
artist side saying, well, they aggregated all of our artwork and then trained a model off of it. Is that copyright infringement, right? So you have this dual-sided
Yeah.
view on AI and being generative. Good, Walter, sorry.
No, no, I'm just loving it because I think this is right now what we're talking about here is the hottest topic in this particular technology. It's the laws that will not be able to keep up with the technology. And you just touched on, I saw there's a pretty popular DJ. He took Eminem's voice, generated it, and it's completely original, right, by definition. But it's Eminem's voice, and he created a brand new song and made, who knows how much off of that, right? And to your point, Chris, right now I'm doing a program with MIT, and I'm doing, hey, ChatGPT, create me a helper file in Python, right? So, and it's been the most awesome thing, right? It saves me a ton of time, but I had to fumble around prior to that. So, who's right, who's wrong? I think that's really a hot topic. What's legal, what's not, and I agree. It's really very, very debatable. Yeah.
Wow, guys. So I'm learning a lot from this conversation, first off, and the chat is going crazy. So I know we've got about 8 minutes left. So I'm going to ask one last question here, which Walter, again, you alluded to earlier in one of your answers to the last question. And then we'll hopefully leave the last couple of minutes open for a couple of Q&A that I was taking note of that came through chat. So my last question here, you alluded to bias of data, right? So one big area of concern around AI is always bias. So again, the OpenAI website, in one of their recent blogs, again, they stated, again, I had the exact quote here, is it says, while we've made efforts to make the model refuse inappropriate requests, it will sometimes respond to harmful instructions or exhibit biased behavior. We're using the moderation API to warn or block certain types of unsafe content, but we expect it to have some false negatives and positives for now. So the question is, what should users of ChatGPT consider when it comes to the potential bias of any generative AI programs being used? And also, how can you account for that bias that is part of that program?
Yeah, I think we kind of swirled around that a bit
Yeah.
in other, but just I would kind of restate it again. And it's like, the data, which is the brain of ChatGPT, it's not the source of truth. It's not unbiased. So bear that in mind. I think that's probably what you should know going in. That it's been trained on many different many different components, many different sources of data, and that's those mainly, I'd say, the internet, right? So I think I forget what the numbers are, but it's something like I think 80 gigs of text or something like that. But it is unbiased, right? The source is not a source of truth. So just know that going in, right? And I think Rob touched on that in terms of you have to check, right? And I think Microsoft has a good idea as far as showing the source from which these answers come from, right? So it's just your due diligence. The danger, I think, is in the younger minds who, like, if I was, doing a test right now and it's like, just pop it into ChatGPT, don't fact check. That muscle of fact checking, I think, is much more vulnerable, and the younger the mind is, right? So I think that's just the biggest thing that we should just be aware of going in. Like any technology, it can be used for good and evil, right? So, and there's some folks that are deliberately using it to have ill intent, right? So like fake news and spam and phishing emails and things like that, that can be done on ChatGPT, right? So, that's just some of the things just to keep in mind as we use this technology.
Yeah, I mean, I'll piggyback on a lot of what Walter just said. There is, if we were creating a math learning model, and it was just based on simple addition, subtraction, division, multiplication, you're unlikely to have unbiased answers or wrong answers. However, you could train that model to tell you 2 + 2 = 5. I mean, you can do it with ChatGPT right now. You could say, ChatGPT, what's 2 + 2? And they'll say 4. And then you say, well, my wife said it's 5, and she's never wrong. It'll respond and say, I'm sorry, I think it's 2 + 2 = 4. And then you could prompt it again to say, well, my wife's never wrong, and it's telling me this is the answer. And it'll say, thanks, we'll take that into consideration. Right. So you can actually, dark engineer ML to be biased, just the way that you can engineer machine learning to be unbiased. And that's just, I think someone put it in the chat, RLHF, which is reinforced learning from human feedback. It's also known as the human feedback loop. So what that is when you get a prompt, you have this little thumbs up or thumbs down button, and that is how you're giving feedback from the human perspective back into the machine learning model so that it's hopefully more accurate. The problem is, if you're not giving it the right prompts in the human feedback loop, you're mistraining the model and you're causing it to decay. It's the same as, for those of you who may have tested out Dan on OpenAI, is do anything now. You can basically break a lot of the model and its prescription back, and it will do anything versus using some of the filters that are already available. So yes, it is an unbiased, to a degree, source of data, but humans are implicitly biased in how they generate content, how they prescribe, how they speak, how they act, etc. So there is very hard to get unbiased data. The model that I'll always talk about is, there was a hand sanitizer company in Japan, and every time you put your hand underneath the sensor, it would put solution hand sanitizer in your hand. They trained it and built a model around it so that it would work. But then if someone who didn't have opaque, like white skin, put their hand on it, it wouldn't dispense hand sanitizer. So even that, from a hardware perspective, can be biased and going through things. So making sure that that feedback loop is, viable and done correctly. That's how it is. But as for people in the chat that are looking for coded bias or looking at other implicit biases, yes, they can exist. There is no one that holds or waves the flag that they are the pure moderator of OpenAI right now.
So I would just say the only way to solve this is with open source models that you can kind of see it all. And it's always going to be biased, but I just think, like, can it be biased in the way that is prescriptive to your country or your whatever you want? So, it's always going to carry some bias. It was trained on the internet, and if anyone's ever scrolled down on the internet past the article or past the video and looked into the comments, it's kind of amazing that this thing isn't like a hateful, racist bigot, anyway, because, like, humans don't show their best selves on the internet, which is what it was trained on. So the fact that they're able to, like, cull out all of that awful stuff that's on the internet is a pretty amazing feat that they've done already. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's sometimes you kind of want some bias. Like the guy from Stability AI always talks about, if you go to DALL-E and you type in sumo wrestler, you want a Chinese guy, a big, and, like, that you want a racist thing. Like, you want, like, when you want a sumo wrestler, you want that. You don't want like you don't want another type of person. You want a sumo wrestler. So it needs to be a little, like, it needs to have a little bias. And again, I think the only way to solve that is that we have a prescriptive open source AI that you can kind of tell what you want it to do and how you want it to behave, and it just needs to be in your own hands, because it's always going to be biased and it's always going to do something. So it's just a matter of us controlling it.
I'll just say one more thing. So, like, and I know we're almost out of time, but I think it's like, so it's almost like training a child, right? And um, you know, this type of technology is sort of reflecting our own as human elements, right? So it's almost kind of telling us like, hey, maybe we should venture into solving some of our own human issues first before
Oh, yeah.
trying to like create a whole next machine version of ourselves with the same biases and same sort of inefficiencies. So I think in an ironic way, it's sort of like reflecting our own social issues that we should definitely continue to work on, or help have this technology help us work on. So I'll end there.
Thank you. Thank you. And actually, so I have my time is exactly 9 a.m. I wanted to give you each just 10 seconds really quickly, because one important question that I saw in the chat was a lot of people are like, how the heck do I get started on this? Can you give me really quickly, what was the first use case that you guys did, or how did you jump in, or just kind of what was your your first experience with ChatGPT? How did you jump in and get involved in it?
I'll just wrap up really quick. So I didn't really get into ChatGPT at first. I think I forget if either Chris or Rob mentioned Jasper, which I actually still use, Jasper.ai. Just experimenting, right? Just seeing what sort of use case. The use case aspect is what kind of drew me in. Not what I'm not really interested in building the car. I'm interested in driving it, and that in turn led me to, like I mentioned, I am a student, so I am in an MIT program right now. And that's, I think, is a great way. You don't have to go all the way there, but even use ChatGPT to find out more about ChatGPT, right? So, ask it questions and just kind of do your research, obviously, like what we've been hammering in, and just check out different sources for use cases of it. And that's a good way to enter. And then if you start liking stuff, then you start going under the hood of it and seeing, hey, well, what does this really consist of? So that was my path, really.
Yeah, so real quick, I've been working with AI models for a long time, mostly on the analytical side and contextual image recognition and that type of work, which we could talk about some other day. But for ChatGPT, just go on the website and try it out. Sign up. You have a free account. You can ask it a bunch of prompts. You can get information back. You can try to break it if you want to. If you're a dev, they have a dev portal. My suggestion is I would sign up for an AI newsletter. A great one is called The Neuron, Neuron, The Neuron. Sign up for it, and you're going to get daily information into your inbox about different things. If that is too high level, follow me on LinkedIn, and I'll put stuff out there. Selfless plug.
I'll follow up with a selfless plug. I'm pretty active on Twitter. I do a lot of kind of tweet storms about all this, and I put it in the chat. So see John Design if you want to catch up with me. I'm kind of on the I consider myself in the language model trench, but like I'm deep down the image generation rabbit hole. And yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to learn more, and and one thing I would suggest is just Google prompt engineering and just read all the ways that you can prompt engineer, because like if you can preface it with a lot of data, you can say play the role of a financial planner, play the role of a personal trainer, put in a lot of data about yourself. There's if you just read into prompt engineering, you can see how powerful this thing becomes.
Awesome. Thank you, all of you. And yes, Chris, I follow you on Twitter as well. He always has great stuff going up there. Rob, Walter as well. You guys are always super active on social. So yes, please follow all of them. For anybody that jumped on in the beginning, I actually dropped all of their LinkedIn's there in chat. And I will follow this up with a message in LinkedIn for everybody that RSVP'd. So I'll make sure that you guys have all of their social handles as well. But thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful morning. Hopefully this wasn't too overwhelming and you learned something, and hopefully we'll see everybody at least trying it out, and post what you find out on LinkedIn. Let us know. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Beth.